Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Madi Kay, this is my big chair, and today I read The Woman in Cabin 10 so you don't have to. You're welcome. Now, the reason why I am covering this today is because recently the Woman in Cabin 10 book to movie adaptation came out on Netflix to rave reviews, she said sarcastically. And yes, I believe that this is one of the many mystery movies on Netflix that just didn't hit the mark. And by hit the mark, I mean surpass the level of mediocrity that we have become accustomed to of Netflix original movies. Now keep in mind that this book was written by Ruth Ware, a woman who surprisingly does have many decent mystery books out on the shelves. I am actually quite a big fan of her recent publication, In a Dark Wood, which is a book about a hen party gone drastically, murderously wrong. Now, Ruth Ware is not exactly the Agatha Christie of our time, mind you, but she at least has quite a few accolades to her name. And she has been very lucky to have one of her many books appear on the silver screen. Although I will have to say at what cost. Because at the end of the day, how much did this movie really rectify from the original material? Although it does elicit the question, is this book worth your time? I can say the wholehearted, purely honest response that the answer to that question is a no. And I'm going to explain to you why in my video today. So buckle up, pop a little bag of popcorn, sit down, and let's get ready to dissect why A Woman in Cabin 10 is really not worth your time. Now, a little fun fact with this particular book, I actually read this as the first book in my book club, a book club that I put together, and dare I say, it was probably one of the worst books I read that year. Now, granted, 2024 was not exactly a winner year when it comes to the amount of books I read, nor was it about the quality of the books themselves. However, I will say that this book stood out to me with the utter and complete devoid lack of quality in any sense of the word. Not to mention that it started off really strong, only to end on a very sour note. And what I mean by that is that this book in particular really did its absolute best to become the absolute worst of its genre. I am not even exaggerating when I say that this book stands out because it is so awful. I will have to say that the worst part of this entire book itself is the protagonist. Yes, that is correct. The Nancy Drew, the Hercule Poirot of this book could not even salvage it because they were the worst part of this book. And I have to say that is a huge rarity because at the end of the day, the crux of the mystery book, the very foundation on which this entire genre lies, is in the integrity and in the prowess of the very detective slash novice crime solver that is our main protagonist. If you can't get that right, I really have to question the validity of your mystery book as a whole. The entire point of the mystery genre is that we, the reader, are rooting for our detective or main character to solve the mystery. But if we don't even like the detective in question, why would we even root for them to solve the crime in the first place? Why don't we just root for the villain? Because at the end of the day, the detective or protagonist of this book is there to serve as a moral compass of the book as a whole. We are supposed to see this person as this integrous, brave, even daring character who is willing to sacrifice themselves on the altar of justice, who is willing to put themselves in danger in order to make sure that the criminal or the bad guy is defeated in the end. And that is no small feat. But at the end of the day, if your reader can't even root for the main character in question, why do we even want to read this book? The entire mystery genre really hinges not only validity of our main character, but also on their intellect, on their moral compass always pointing due north. If it does not do that, if our detective is more or less on the gray scale when it comes to morality, we begin to lose faith in the genre as a whole. Now, of course, I am saying that as someone who grew up with the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Agatha Christie, A lot of these books had a very righteous detective who was willing to put everything on the line in order to solve the crime and bring the criminal to justice, even if that meant they put themselves in mortal danger. That is the kind of hero that the mystery genre prides itself upon. But in The Woman in Cabin 10, our main character, Lo, is anything but a morally righteous character. Keep in mind that in a mystery book, we are really dealing with more black and white. Now, I'm not saying that characters in a mystery novel cannot be morally complex or in the gray area when it comes to virtues. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying when you have an entire genre that is built upon the ideology of the black and white, on good versus evil, on justice versus crime, you cannot have your main protagonist really toe the line between the two. You have to make sure that they maintain not only their purity of heart, but also their purity of mind. The entire mystery genre really hinges upon the main character in question. And the main character in this book is so far removed from the genre as a whole that I question whether or not we are able to actually cheer for her in the first place. When I read this book, I have to say that I was wildly underwhelmed by the protagonist named Lo. Lo was a very complex woman who was dealing with a lot of demons. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing when it comes to the mystery genre. I don't mind watching a detective pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, really trying to not only overcome their own personal demons, but try to solve a crime and help out their community at the same time. I'm not saying that's a bad path to take. However, what I'm saying is that if the main protagonist or detective has no redeeming qualities, how can I root for them to solve the crime? That is a huge overstep on the author's part, especially when we are spending the majority of our time with an insufferable main character. And believe you me, we'll get into why this character is insufferable in just a moment. But before we get into that, make sure to leave a like down below, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and comment down below your answer to today's question. What is the most important part of a mystery novel to you? What does every mystery novel have to get right in order for you to not only enjoy it, but also to endure it to the bitter end? Make sure to leave your answer down below. And before we get into the story as a whole, I do want to warn you about some very explicit content warnings that we will be discussing throughout the entirety of this video. And these include, but are not limited to, a very invasive robbery, alcoholism, insomnia, infidelity, mentions of cancer, murder, sexism, narcissism, blatant stupidity, as well as racism. So if these topics are going to be very difficult for you to talk about in this video, I would invite you to please sign off right now. Wait until you are in a point in your life where you can actually actively talk about these and then come back when you are ready. Otherwise, if you're fully prepared to talk about these topics today, then let's get into it. Now, our story starts off with our introduction to our very flawed main character named Lo. Now, Lo is really struggle bussing through it. She's having a very difficult time. She is in the trenches. She is really struggling to pull herself up by the bootstraps and being a strong, independent woman who is also really thriving in her career. When we first meet Lo, she is stumbling into her subterranean apartment in the middle of the night. And what I mean by the in the middle of the night, I mean that she is literally falling into her apartment at 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, we never truly understand the true nature of why she went out in the first place to stumble through all these bars only to end up back in her apartment in the wee hours of the morning. And yes, I'm using wee hours as a term because this book also takes place in London, England. Hence the slightly British terms used here, so be prepared for my very loose interpretation of British culture. Now, when Lo stumbles back into her apartment, she becomes very privy of the fact that her apartment is being robbed, and she knows this because her cat is out of its room and wandering around the apartment willy-nilly. Now, she starts to hear some noises, and because she is a travel journalist, she decides to go and investigate the matter. Now, she stumbles upon her perpetrator, who is a man in all black, wearing gloves, who basically shoves her inside of her room and continues to ransack her apartment. Nothing really happens to her, but of course, it's a very traumatizing, very violating experience for Lo. I at first really related to her as a character because this is one of my greatest fears as a woman is not only being robbed at gunpoint, by the way, but also being violated in one of my safest places possible. Who of us would be able to actually handle the situation properly? Not many, good sir. Not many, I will tell you that much. So Lo's inside of her room listening to this man basically destroy her apartment and just prays to whatever God is listening that he will go away eventually. And he does. He grabs her purse and he leaves. Now, the only problem with this is that her purse contains her work phone and all of her information on it. Again, not a very good day for Lo. So Lo is sitting there utterly devastated with nothing but her work laptop to keep her company. So she goes up to her neighbor's flat just above hers and basically stumbles inside and tells her that she has been robbed. Now, of course, the cops come, they question her, and Lo can't really give them any description, despite the fact that later on she remembers that this man had black hair on his arms. And her first instinct, instead of actually going to the police and informing them of this very crucial detail, she just decides to sit with it and do absolutely nothing with it. And this is a pattern that develops over time. Whenever she discovers something that is crucial to the case in hand, she never actually reports it to the authorities who can do anything about it. Keep in mind, this woman is a travel journalist. She has absolutely no training in detective work whatsoever. And even worse, she actively keeps the authorities out of the investigation and leaves vital clues out that can otherwise help them find the perpetrator in question. She does absolutely nothing but create more problems. That is not a good trait to have in a protagonist in a mystery novel. You want your protagonist to solve problems, not create them or prevent the very people who can solve those problems from solving them by withholding vital information from them. Again, this woman in the very beginning really started to grow on my nerves. And I really wish that this woman had any redeeming qualities outside of the fact that she just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. This woman is only able to get away with what she could get away with because she is so lucky. And that's not the best trait to have in a protagonist in a mystery novel. And the worst part is that this endeavor is taking place 2 days before Lo is supposed to go on this very important business trip. Now, what I mean by that is that she has been invited to be a guinea pig on a virgin voyage of a billionaire's yacht. Yes, that is correct. This billionaire has decided to become a travel mogul who is renting out his very luxurious yacht to other very high-end business owners and friends of his. Now, she's about to go on this trip and write an article about how luxurious and perfect the entire experience is, and she decided to spend one of the many nights before her trip not packing, but going to a bar for reasons unknown until 4 a.m. in the morning. I don't want to judge her for that because who among us has never had a very long night bender out in the bars, partying it up, enjoying our single life? The issue is that she's not entirely single. She does have a boyfriend who she only really seems to want to acknowledge whenever she's in desperate need of something. She decides to finally go to her boyfriend's apartment, the only place where she feels entirely safe. Now, upon arrival, this woman decides to strip down naked, climb into his bed, and just lie there and fall asleep. Now, this robbery serves as the inciting incident into Lo's entire mental downward spiral. She struggles with insomnia, alcoholism, and even with hallucinogenic episodes, in which she even questions her own sanity. When she goes to her boyfriend's apartment, she tells him her very sad tale of her being robbed and the man escaping with her work phone. Now, I thought that this was going to be the Chekhov's gun that would let us know that this robber was going to play a very big part in the rest of the story. But in reality, he was just basically used as a plot device as to why we should question Lo and treat her as an unreliable narrator. Of course, you could argue that any character is an unreliable character because no matter what, there's always going to be an implicit bias when it comes to their own personal story. They're always going to treat themselves as the main right character, no matter what. And Lo is absolutely no exception to this rule. She goes to her situationship boyfriend Judah, who she's not entirely really sold on. Again, this is a man who is falling head over heels for her. He's drooling over her. He's practically begging for her to be his exclusive girlfriend, and Lo is just not having it. You can tell that she is mentally and emotionally checked out from this relationship, but she is really trying to drag this poor man along because she is lonely and desperate and just wants anyone there to just be a shoulder for her to cry on. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing because who among us isn't in desperate need of a community? Who among us doesn't desperately need someone to confide in? I am not critiquing Lo because of that. I'm critiquing Lo because she very clearly does not like this man. In fact, I would even say that she kind of hates him at some point. She shows absolutely no interest in him other than what he could do to serve her best interests. He is there as a shoulder to cry on. She basically crashes on his bed naked and just expects him to take care of her, which honestly, what else is a partner for? At your lowest point, you should really have someone in your life who you can really trust and rely on to pick you up when you've fallen down. But Lo very clearly expresses to the reader that she is not that type of partner to reciprocate that kind of care. I do not want to fault Lo because she's obviously going through a lot of trauma. She has suffered a lot at the hands of this robber who just came in looking for some extra cash in a subterranean basement apartment. That would not be the first place I would rob, but you do you, boo. And Lo, of course, establishes herself as the victim for the rest of this book. Not faulting her for that because, of course, being robbed is a very traumatic experience. What I'm saying here is that Lo uses this incident to get as much mileage out of it as she can. She plays the poor victim card. I'm a victim all your life. And she really does nothing at all to solve her own problems other than to just run to the next person that she can rely on with her tail between her legs. And I'm not saying that that is necessarily a bad trait to have in a character, but a mystery novel in which we are supposed to rely on this character and their autonomy and their bravery and individuality and intellect. It does not bode well at the very first instance that we see them. They are literally crawling to other people to solve their problems for them. I'm sorry, but how can we expect this person to solve a mystery, a murder mystery at that, when they can't even solve their own problems? That is not exactly a person that I would trust with my life, let alone a murder case. Another thing I would like to say about Lo is that she hyperfixates on the fact that this man had gloves while he was robbing her. Babe, he is following the rules that the park rangers taught us years ago. Leave no trace. Obviously, when you are trying to rob a place, you do not want to leave your fingerprints behind. And for some reason, this takes her hours to figure that out. Again, it bothers me that this woman is so hyperfixated on the fact that this man was wearing gloves when it makes so much sense logically that this man was trying to leave no trace while he was committing a crime. You cannot leave your DNA just lying around in the very house that you ransacked unless you really want the cops to come and find you very quickly. Lo just proves herself in this point to be a very incompetent main character. And again, I do not trust her as a person to solve a mystery, which is very hard for me to root for her when she is actually trying to solve a mystery later on in a mystery novel. That should not be happening. The one thing I will say, the one redeeming quality I will say that Lo has, at least in the very beginning of the story, is the fact that she actually has a sense of humor. In the very beginning, when she finally realizes that she has a job that she needs to report to in a couple of days, she tries to explain to us, the reader, what her job is going to be and where it takes place, and she cannot actually pinpoint a very place that she's going to be working for the next few weeks. And I find that to be extremely funny because in her narration, she tells us, for a travel journalist, I am worryingly bad at geography, which, same girl, same. As an American, I barely know where we are at in this world. It is quite sad, actually, the fact that most Americans cannot even name the 50 states in their country. Anyway, back to the book. So Lo confesses that even she is bad at her normal job, not even considering the fact that she is going to try to take on a whole new job of becoming a detective. Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in her to solve this crime, if I'm going to be honest with you, let alone do her job as a journalist, which, spoiler alert, even though her laptop was salvaged in the robbery, and this is the one avenue for which she can actually do her job, she does not write a single word this entire book. I'm not even lying to you. That actually happens. She sits there the entire time that she is on this boat and she tells herself, I really need to write. I really need to do my job. I'm here to write an article about this yacht. I'm not even doing that. Instead, I'm procrastinating but trying to solve this woman's murder, which we'll get to in a minute. And as a writer myself, I can somewhat relate to this on a spiritual level. But at the same time, I find it very hard to root for a woman who can't even do her own job, let alone do a job that she is very unqualified for. It's very, very hard for me to believe that this woman could figure out who murdered the girl next door while she can't even type a couple sentences into a Word document. So anyway, back to the story. So Lo is lying down in her bed, naked in her boyfriend's apartment, which most guys would not really, complain about. But either way, she assaults him because she thinks that he is another robber coming to take what little is left of her valuable possessions, I presume. And instead, she realizes that it is her situationship boyfriend, Judah, who is more than happy to see her there. So Judah decides to beg her to stay in his apartment until she needs to go to this trip of hers. And while she is there, he informs her in no uncertain terms that he has turned down a job in New York because he wants to stay with her. Keep in mind, these two are not official yet. They are loosely labeled boyfriend and girlfriend. And then he decides to make a huge career choice based off the fact that they are an official couple. And then Lo looks at him like he's growing horns out of his head. And the reason why I don't like this is because Judah puts himself on this pedestal and says, "Oh, look at me. I'm willing to make sacrifices for you, a woman who is not even my girlfriend." And he expects her to throw a parade for him? No, babe, no. That's not how that works. If you're going to make radical, life-changing decisions based off of your partner, make sure your partner is aware of that. And also, why wouldn't you take an amazing opportunity to go work in an amazing new place in a different country that could further, even better your career? Why would you saddle yourself next to someone who barely even likes you, truth be told? And I will say that if the roles were flipped and if it was Lo making this decision and not Judah, I would have the exact same thing to say to her and asking her, "Girlie, why are you saying for this mediocre man who doesn't even like you?" So Judah drops this huge bomb on her and basically confesses his love for her, and Lo, who is not emotionally or even mentally ready to talk about this right now, her apartment just got robbed. She has bigger fish to fry. Why are you bringing this up now, Judah? She decides to just exit out of this narrative and tells him, "I need to go pack." Now, I want to be very delicate with how I say this. So, you know how sometimes partners will deprive you of sleep or just unset your alarms for you so that way you can stay with them a little bit longer? That's the kind of vibe that Judah is giving me, where he purposely tries to keep her in his apartment, tells her, "Oh, you don't need to go on that trip. Why? You just got robbed. You're in a lot of trauma right now. Just stay with me. You're a cute little kind of boyfriend, Judah. I'll be here to protect you. You're fine." And he tries to put off her trip and try to rob her of this experience because he robbed himself of a financial job related experience. I don't know. This is a very strange way. It could just be my interpretation of it, but just from my experience, when a partner tries to rob you of your own autonomous path to becoming a better version of yourself just so they can have the convenience of a relationship with you, I really call to question their main motivations there and whether or not they're going to be a good partner for you. Because in this sense, it just seems that Judah just really likes Lo because he knows that he can manipulate her and she's in a vulnerable position. And he reasons with himself, "Oh, she won't want to leave because she's had this horrible thing happen to her. And I'm going to take advantage of that." So anyway, Lo decides to go on the trip anyway, and she just leaves her boyfriend behind, and she actually softly breaks up with him by saying, "I don't think this is working out. You're obviously way more into me than I am into you, and I'm just gonna leave." And then she just goes on the trip and leaves him there. I'm not gonna lie, this brought me some level of satisfaction because I did not like Judah as a character, so I thought that was really funny that she just basically broke up with him after he gave up a very lucrative career for her, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, you should never give up a career for someone because they won't do the same for you. Spoiler alert. Lo decides to go on the yacht, and once she gets there, this entire yacht is just, oh, it's so extravagant. It is amazing. This yacht is so big and yet so small. It is luxurious despite its simplicity. And I'm not gonna lie to you all, I was so confused on the blueprints of this boat, a very limited space, mind you. And every chapter, it seemed like we were introduced to a brand new room or brand new level on this boat. And I'm sorry, but this boat is not the Titanic. This boat is a small little yacht that should only really be able to house 10 guests and like 10 to 20 servants. So picture I don't want to say pontoon, but just picture like a cruise ship if it had a baby, so to speak. And it has like a main level with a deck where you have a hot tub and a dining room. And then the top levels, you have 10 cabins for 10 people. But down below in the cavernous depths of this boat, that's where it gets really tricky. But then in the next chapter, we're told that this place has a spa with a mudroom, but it didn't have that mudroom in that chapter. And then, oh, there's all these rooms in the nether regions of this boat that aren't being used, that are just sitting there empty. And it just seems very strange. It almost seems like the author herself does not know the exact dimensions of this boat. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I just thought it was really funny. The fact that this boat had a very, set sort of dimension. And then every new chapter, it feels like she was trying to build onto this boat until it started to become the stacked houses in the Ready Player One movie. At one point, I wouldn't be surprised if the mud spa was attached to a dinghy that was literally tied to the end of this yacht. The proportions on this boat made absolutely no sense, and I just could not help but laugh at the utter ridiculousness of this book and the setting. So Lo gets on this boat and she is utterly astounded at the nature of it. She cannot believe that there's a chandelier on this boat. She loves the carpet. She admires the draperies. And as she goes to her room, she is just utterly flabbergasted by the utter and complete elegance of it all. And she just feels like a princess in this boat, and she's just so happy to be there. And as she's unpacking, she realizes that she does not have mascara. In her utter vulnerable state, she could not remember to pack basic necessities such as mascara. So she panics, of course, as any woman would do in her right mind. And she goes to the neighboring cabin, the titular character of the woman in cabin 10. And she tells her, I don't have any mascara. Can I borrow yours? No, bestie. No, you don't borrow mascara. That's how you get diseases. Who borrows someone's mascara? Ugh, it's so gross. Hygiene? Question mark? What is this woman thinking? Absolutely not. That is so utterly disgusting. I cannot even fathom a world in which women are comfortable enough to give each other mascara. Even chapstick. You have to like shave off the first few layers of that bad boy just be able to feel comfortable enough to put it on your lips if you're borrowing it from a friend. This was just so utterly gross to me, and this just made me question who raised Lo? Like, who is this woman raised by wolves? Where do you get the idea that you can just borrow someone's mascara and they would be okay with it? And then this woman, because she is obviously guilty of something, capitulates and gives Lo her mascara. Lo goes back to her room. She puts it on, and just as she's about to go return it to the woman, she finds that she is nowhere to be seen. So Lo is a little bit skeptical about this, but she decides to just dress up, get all dolled up for the night, and goes to meet the other patrons of this yacht. Now, the other patrons of this yacht are essentially rich, entitled, privileged white people, to put it in as delicate of a term as I can. And everyone there is just wondering why the sympathy hire is here on this boat. And there are these douchebags on this yacht that are really messing with her, making fun of her behind her back in front of her face, so to speak. Their vibe is very off, and she does not like them. And one of these gentlemen in particular puts her into a chokehold in order to just demonstrate basic self-defense maneuvers. And I was sitting there reading this scene, and I was thinking to myself, sir, you just randomly assault someone without their consent just to prove a point. I'm sorry. Who raised you? Who gave you the idea that you can just randomly assault peasants in order to prove a point? It was just very strange. And the whole time he was laughing and everyone was very obviously uncomfortable. This man does not know how to read the room, let alone in between the lines. And Lo was very much uncomfortable after this entire dinner interaction with these rich people. And again, these people are friends of the billionaire who is the owner of the boat. So he invited them on, as well as her, to be the guinea pigs of his brand new business venture. And Lo decides to remove herself from this place and go back to her room and just get rip-roaring drunk. And when she wakes up from her stupor at like 3 a.m., she can swear that she hears this womanly scream. And then she hears water splashing, almost like something is falling into the water, mind you. And she goes out to her balcony and she sees this woman's body descending down into the depths of the deep blue sea. And that is the crux of the entire book. Now, during this scene, I will have to say it was one of the more intense scenes because, again, it built up a lot of mystery, a lot of tension, and it really feeds into this whole narrative of the unreliable female narrator. Now, of course, this woman is the quintessential unreliable narrator. And in the hands of a better author, this book could have done immensely better because for centuries, women have not been taken seriously. Thanks to the patriarchy, thanks to the politics of not only my country, but of many other countries. Women have never been taken seriously because they are deemed the weaker sex or they are deemed the more emotional sex, and emotions are bad, right? And in many cases, women like Lo are not taken seriously because they are deemed mentally unwell, or they are not taken seriously because they are women and they're emotional. I really wish the author would have explored the detriment that society plays into this narrative in which when we don't listen to women, we all suffer. That could have been a really interesting theme of this book, but instead, she just takes it in another direction. And instead of making Lo a character that navigates in the gray sea of morality, she just makes her an insufferable character. And by insufferable, I mean low-key racist. What really surprised me is the fact that in every interaction that this woman ever has, a working class person who is also in her same caste system, by the way, she is also a working woman, and yet she deems herself better because she was invited on this yacht. And she has her own room that is above water. And she has a fancy evening gown and she's invited to dinner and she's doted upon. She's better than these people because she's not technically working, because she doesn't write a single fucking word this entire book, even though that's what she was hired to do. She basically acts like a guest on this boat, which she basically is at this point because she's not even doing the job that she was paid to do in the first place, which just boggles my mind. But anyway, so she looks down her nose at these working class, non-British native peasants on the boat, the employees who are doting on her hand and foot. Even worse yet, these people are Norwegian. Is that how you... They're from Norway. What is the nationality? How you say that? I'm a dumb American who doesn't also understand geography. Keep in mind, whenever the author deigns to have these people talk in their native language, it is basic words like talk, thank you, hi, hello. And she doesn't even understand basic words. Now this woman, mind you, a well-traveled woman of the world who has been in several countries, many countries that most American people and British people probably never been to, never been able to explore. This woman, this well-traveled woman, is upset when people don't know how to speak British English. She's upset when they don't speak her dialect, her language perfectly. She always remarks on it. She's always saying, wow, this person speaks perfect English. You would never even know that they weren't English. Every interaction she has with an employee on this boat, that is the first thing that she mentions about them. And I'm sitting there, also a well-traveled woman of the world who has been in many countries that even my own parents, my own family, my friends have never been to before, will probably never go to, by the way. And I'm sitting there thinking, why is that the first thing that you think of when you think of people who are not born in your country? As someone who's been around the world, who has a certain appreciation and reverence for other cultures and other people, who understands that other people come from other ways of life, who speak other languages, who have other worldly experiences outside my own, I never see my life and my way as the only way to live, as the Rosetta Stone of how other people should live their life. I never see myself as that way because I see myself as like a drop in the ocean that is humanity, so to speak. I only see myself as one of the many thousands of ways that people can live. I never hold myself up to the one and only standard that only everyone should live. I don't believe that only people should speak English. I think that Americans should speak other languages. And I think it really robs us of many cultural experiences by preventing us from learning other languages because we demonize other cultures. I think that's so wrong. And it really has that level of like white supremacy, like Sydney Sweeney has great genes, that level of entitlement when it comes to our livelihoods and our lives. And I found that that really was reminiscent through Low, where she constantly, whenever she picked up oh, this person isn't English. And I was sitting there thinking, you're on a Norwegian boat in Norway that is in proximity to Switzerland. And you're surprised that these people aren't British, that they speak other languages? What do you mean? What do you mean? British people are the only people to exist in the world. And this is such a colonizer mentality that this woman has. And she's a travel journalist. She's been to several countries, allegedly, and she has seen other people and experienced their culture. And yet she turns around and she's like, oh, by the way, I can tell you're not English. Your accent is not perfect British English accent. Why is that? And then she applauds the characters who have a more educated, British accent than the other characters do. And I don't like it because it really speaks volumes about the kind of person that Lo is. The fact that she feels a need to insert herself into other people's cultures and then criticize them when they do not meet her where she's at. Even though she, as a well-traveled woman, which by the way, we never actually see, I didn't actually believe that she's a real travel journalist, but anyway. So she, as a well-traveled person, goes into these people's spaces. Honestly, she invades their home in the name of a career. And then she criticizes them for when they don't speak her language or talk in a proper English accent. And we're supposed to be rooting for this person. As someone who has also been well-traveled, I never go into a space expecting them to speak English. I appreciate it. And I'm also greatly relieved when they can. But I do my part. I try to learn a few words in a different language, like Spanish. I used to live in Spain, so I tried my best to speak Spanish. And then, of course, the native Spanish speakers there could tell that I was American because I speak atrocious Spanish, and they would immediately revert to English out of the kindness of their heart. And because I obviously was just butchering their language and they just could not have it. They could not do with it. But I tried my best, like I would go in, I would try to do my best to ingratiate myself to them and try to meet them in the middle, so to speak. That is a proper way to do it. You go to another person's country. It's like going to someone's house. You don't go to someone's house and demand that they adhere to your rules. No, you adhere to their rules out of respect, out of the graciousness of being a guest in your host's home. You don't go into someone's home and tell them how to live their lives. That's incredibly disrespectful and rude. And I find that incredibly funny that this woman who is well-traveled and very cultured and experienced is going into someone else's home country and criticizing them for not speaking her language properly. Who raised you, babe? And that's a problem. We don't know. Outside of this story and the fact that she has a kind of boyfriend named Judah and that she is a travel journalist with a cat who lives in a subterranean apartment below the woman above her who has a very lively red apartment, we don't know anything about Lo. And that's a problem with a lot of female protagonists that I've been noticing. Like in the Summer I Turned Pretty video, I pointed out that I don't know anything about Belly. In 3 books, I don't know what her hobbies are. I don't know what major she studied in college. I spent 900 pages with this girl, hours and hours of my time with her, and I still don't know the basic things about her that make her her own person outside of the fact that she likes 2 boys at the same time. That is not a person. That is a cardboard cutout caricature of a person. Same thing with Lo. The reason why I don't like Lo, the reason why I cannot attach myself to her as a character is because she's not believable or authentic enough to be a genuine person. That's the whole point of storytelling, right? Is that even though we know that is not real, the author has to in some way try to trick us into thinking that this is real, that this is authentic enough to where we could see this person manifest right in front of us, to where we could see how this entire plot could play out in real time. where even though this is fantastical in many senses of the word, that the author can trick the reader into thinking that is authentic enough to where it could potentially happen in real life. And I don't have that sense of realism with this story because, truth be told, this feels like a lonely girl fantasy of someone who is so pathetic and so desperate for attention, who is able to solve a crime just out of sheer luck. Honestly, a situation fell into her lap, both literally and figuratively, and she had nothing but luck on her side in order to aid her in this entire facade of a mystery. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. So, after Lo sees this woman descend into the depths of the ocean, she decides to go immediately talk to the captain of the ship, who already doesn't like her because she's racist. And she goes and talks to this captain, wakes him up in the wee hours of the night, and she basically yells at him and demands him to do his job. And she is incensed. She doesn't like the fact that this man, who sees a drunk, disheveled woman, doesn't take her seriously. And truth be told, I don't blame him. I don't think I would take myself seriously if I was running around making accusations that a woman was murdered right in front of me. This is why I tell people to treat people the way you want to be treated, because the minute that you start making murder accusations against someone and no one backs you up, that's going to be a problem. And that's why no one takes Lo seriously, is not because she is a woman who is also drunk and dealing with insomnia and hallucinations. It's because she's kind of a jerk. She's not a very nice or pleasant person. I'm not saying that women need to be nice or pleasant in order to be taken seriously. What I am saying is that if you're not a very polite or good person, people can pick up on that. And then when you're in a very difficult situation, but you treated other people around you poorly, you cannot be surprised when they do not want to help you. And keep in mind that she has made this captain go out of his way to not only do his own job, but go beyond the boundaries of his own job in order to just make this, for lack of a better term, Karen, happy. She's coming across as such a Karen in this moment. It is honestly surprising to me that this captain didn't just throw her overboard. Honestly, I would not blame him if he did. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to be unkind to Lo, but this entire time, not only did Lo insult his entire crew by essentially insinuating that she will only talk to people who are English speaking enough, but she also does not respect their boundaries. She is waking these people up during the only time that they are able to rest, relax, and sleep because they are catering to these rich, privileged people for weeks. They have no time to themselves. The only free time these people have is to sleep, and she is robbing them of this. So, of course, she goes to the captain, she Karen's all over him, and he has no other choice but to keep her happy and literally wake up his entire crew in the middle of the night and go in search of a woman who, by the way, according to the records, does not exist. The people who were supposed to be in cabin 10 left last minute because they were also robbed. And I was sitting there like, oh, Chekhov's gun, the robber. He found out who else was going on this boat, and that's why he has her phone. So he went through her phone, he found out where she's going, he found out the guest list of all the people who are going to be on that yacht, and he chose his next victim in order to rob them, prevent them from going on the boat, so that way he and the Bonnie to his Clyde could go on the boat and start robbing all the rich billionaires who were on there. I'm like, that's smart. I thought that was going to happen. That was in my headcanon, that this robber was going to find her phone, figure out that she was going on this ritzy billionaire yacht voyage in Norway, and get on there and start stealing from these people, robbing them blind, and then getting off the next port and just disappearing into the ether. That's what I thought was going to happen, because that would have been so brilliant that this robber, who this woman was hyper fixated on, was not only the inciting incident of this book, but he was also the perpetrator who also led to the murder on the boat. That would have been such super villain level shit, where not only did he traumatize her, but he routinely played with her head and messed with her throughout the entire book and tried to convince her that she was crazy, when in reality, she was right. That would have been so interesting, but no. After that first scene with the robber, we never hear from him again. In fact, that second robbery was just a coincidence. Because, London is so rife with robberies, I really felt like that was a lost opportunity when it came to this book. The fact that Ruth Ware didn't really want to tie these two storylines together. And I felt like it would have made so much sense that this robber was really scraping the bottom of the barrel. They're really in hard times. If they could stumble upon this lottery, mind you, when it comes to robbery, I feel like that would make way more sense in their character and to rope in their female partner who could play as a woman in cabin 10 to just disperse any suspicions that something is going on while her male counterpart was robbing these people blind. I feel like that would have been a so much better story and book. But no, we got this instead. Yay. So anyway, Lo begins her own personal investigation, which I don't think she is qualified for because, truth be told, I don't think she's really qualified to do this job that she was hired to do. But anyway, so she starts doing the one thing that is probably the worst thing for anyone who is investigating a crime to do, and that is letting all the potential suspects know that she is investigating them. Rule number one, when you're solving a mystery as an unqualified detective, don't let people know what you're up to or that you're onto them or that you suspect them, because guess what? They're gonna go and try to hide the evidence or try to get rid of you. Terrible idea. And even worse, at one point, she is on the deck where all these people are relaxing in the hot tub, having a great time. And then this one particular person asks her, why are you asking everyone these questions? What's going on? And then she literally announces to the entire boat, to every single person on that boat, who is a potential suspect, that she is trying to solve a murder investigation. And she thinks everyone there is a culprit. And she survives this somehow. Not sure how she was able to do that, but I digress. And then Lo starts to feel like somebody's starting to watch her and follow her around. And strange things are happening where she has these near-death experiences, almost like someone is trying to silence her for good. Well, Lo, maybe if you didn't go around announcing the fact that you were trying to solve a murder of a woman who apparently doesn't exist on the boat, then maybe you wouldn't have this problem in the first place. Because yes, according to the captain's log, no one was supposed to be in cabin 10. And now because of that announcement, everyone thinks that she's crazy. But then one day Lo wakes up and she is actually imprisoned in one of the many empty rooms under the deck. And now she is trapped down there with a very sparse supply of food and water that is only replenished every other day. She's terrified, she is scared, she has no idea what's going on until one day it is revealed that the woman in cabin 10 who she witnessed dying in the sea is actually alive and well, and not only that, but she is the one imprisoning her for her own safety. Yes, that is correct. The woman in cabin 10 is trying to protect Lo by imprisoning her below decks in the yacht. And this is when Lo finally finds out what actually is happening on the boat. Now, it turns out that the woman in cabin 10 was actually the mistress of the billionaire who owns the yacht in the first place. Now, the billionaire has a dying, ailing wife who he is no longer in love with, who he's actively cheating on with the woman in cabin 10. Now, the woman in cabin 10 is an actress, a woman who is very well versed in the act of pretending, who is able to make up her face to look like certain people. And basically, she and the billionaire have been outwardly having an affair while his wife is staying at home. So the woman in cabin 10 has been making herself up, putting on the scarf, pretending to be this man's wife, while everyone is taking pictures of them. So this woman is actively pretending to be this man's wife, while his wife is actually suffering of cancer at home. Now, of course, in the age of social media, you can only cheat on someone for so long before people start to find out. And lo and behold, the woman in question does find out that her husband is cheating on her because there are people posting pictures of him on social media. Yes, you are a billionaire, one of the many famous people in the world. How did you expect this to go well? So the wife finds out, of course, and the billionaire and the woman in cabin 10 concoct this plan to kill his wife and dispose of her body, and basically to have her step in as the wife. Now, of course, this plan, like most murder plans, do not exactly go the way that they expected, and the woman in cabin 10 is now panicking, and she's not sure how she can possibly get herself out of this situation. So she lets Lo go by leaving the door unlocked and allows her a path to escape the boat. Now, the boat is currently docked in a Norwegian fjord in which Lo can make her escape. So this is probably one of the most entertaining parts of the entire book because according to Ruth Ware, this travel journalist who has been basically kept in captivity for the past week, deprived of nutrients and water and the like, was able to rock climb on a slick surface out of the room that she was held captive onto the many decks where she was able to navigate her way across the boat side and onto the dock itself, where she miraculously didn't fall. Keep in mind, this is also in the dead of winter, and this woman is running around barefoot in the Norwegian fjords where there is fresh snow on the ground, and somehow she does not develop frostbite or hypothermia in the slightest. And this was where I really started to struggle with this book because I can no longer suspend my disbelief. I can no longer pretend that this woman could strike out on her own and really be able to solve her own problems because my gosh, there's absolutely no way. This woman was literally operating on pure luck alone. After she miraculously is able to escape this boat, she does the one thing that Anne, the woman in cabin 10, told her not to do, which was to immediately go to the authorities. Because of course the authorities are in the very pockets of the billionaires. These corrupt businessmen are also corrupting the police of that town because the minute that she goes to the authorities, they immediately call the billionaire and let him know that this woman is running around the Norwegian fjords and is saying that he murdered someone. So she's running full on through this snowy field barefoot with barely anything to cover up to keep her warm. This woman is running through these snowy fields, happens across the farm, asks for help, and she somehow is able to escape the situation. I'm telling you, I don't know how this woman was able to survive because from the point where she stumbles across this farm with where these Norwegian folk who spoke no English, she told us in explicit detail, by the way, and then she went from that to going back to England, and the billionaire is now being tried for murdering his wife. It was a whole whirlwind of processes, and believe you me, I have no idea how she was able to get from point A to point B. There is no semblance of logic throughout this entire story. The ending was so rushed to the point where I just sat back and I just gave up because I just don't know how this woman was able to pull herself up by her bootstraps and get out of the situation. And also, by the way, Anne was able to make out with this billionaire's money and just go overseas and live her life free of the crime that she committed because yes, she was an accomplice in this entire endeavor, but somehow she was able to get away with it because she was a woman, and it's fine when an underpaid actress commits murder, but not her rich billionaire boyfriend. That's fine. That's the way the world works nowadays, right? The billionaires always get their just desserts, and the poor actress and mistresses are able to get away with all their money in tow. Like, don't threaten me with a good time. Am I right, lady? So anyway, Lo is able to solve the mystery, figure out what really was going down on that boat, get back to her situationship boyfriend, declares her love for him, so to speak, by basically saying, hey, I have no one else in my life, because apparently I have no friends or family outside of you. I don't want to be with anyone else but you. And she basically goes and tells him, call your employer up of this job that you wanted to go to in New York. Tell them that you want the job anyway, and let's just get out of here. We need to escape because I'm basically now a fugitive because I put this billionaire behind bars. We need to leave. And Judah is more than happy to do that, and they get out, and it's happily ever after for these two. So that's the story, and I'm not lying when I tell you this is probably one of the most underwhelming mystery novels I've ever read in my life, made even worse by the fact that this protagonist was probably one of the more insufferable protagonists I've read in a while, and I do not mean that lightly. I have read many a book in which these main characters are just main charactering all over the story. They have absolutely no redeemable qualities whatsoever. And Lo has even lowered the bar of that to a certain extent, which is really sad because this book really started off with a lot of promise. I really loved the color symbolism of the story. I guess we might as well just transition into things I really liked about this. Because even though I gave this book a 1 out of 5 stars, the 1 star that I actually allowed it was because of the color symbolism. So a lot of the colors that are surrounding the character of Lo have to do with the color of blue. Now, blue traditionally symbolizes calm, but also water. Again, keeping in mind the fact that she's going on this boat, her apartment is subterranean, meaning that it's underground, right? She is associated with water to some extent. Even her own apartment is below sea level, which is very indicative of not only where she's going to end up later on in the book, but also of her mental state, that she is below what is necessary to keep her head above water. Not to mention that the color blue is also very symbolic of loneliness. Lo is literally on her own. She has no one else in her life other than her overbearing boyfriend that she barely likes, that she basically used as an escape plan from her problems, and even her own neighbor. Her neighbor, the very nice woman who lives above her, her entire apartment is full of red, a very lively, passionate color, which is very indicative of love and livelihood. It is very clear from this woman's apartment that she has a lot of personality. She has a lot of little knickknacks, she has doilies, she has more color than the unseemly gray that basically plagues Lo's entire apartment. Even her situationship boyfriend, Judah, has a lot more color in his apartment as well. He is also strongly associated with red because he is very passionate about Lo, even though Lo has very indifferent, apathetic feelings towards him. She has no feelings about anyone outside of herself, and even those are very negative. So the color blue is associated with Lo, who is very much in a world of her own, on a very placid sea in which she is very much stranded out in an ocean of her own indifference and her own struggles, whereas other characters like her neighbor and Judah are more associated with the color of red. Even the woman in cabin 10 is associated with the color red because she, when we first meet her, is wearing pink. Other characters as well are associated with more lively colors in the way that alienates them from Lo. Lo is very much a very sad, very traumatized, very lonely character, which is why the color blue is the most one that's strongly associated with her character. The one other thing I really liked about Lo in the very beginning that was not translated throughout the rest of the story, which I really wish it was the fact that Lo actually had a sense of humor. In the very beginning of the story, Lo had a lot of self-deprecating humor. The fact that she even confessed that as a travel journalist, she was very worryingly bad at geography. She also was very bad at maths. You know, whenever the British attached the S to the word maths instead of just saying math, she was like, oh, I need to go over and do my maths now. Oh, I'm very bad at maths as well as I'm very bad at geography. Please excuse my very poor excuse for a British accent. I'm doing my best. But yeah, she was very funny in the very beginning of the story. And then all of a sudden, it was like a switch went off. The minute that she got on the boat, she lost any and all personality. And I really wish that Ruth Ware really copied and pasted that entire humorous persona of Lo, because even though she was very much out of her depth, pun intended, at least she was funny. But throughout the rest of the story, it was almost like she replaced her intellect and humor with racist and white supremacist qualities. Instead of allowing Lo the room in which she could make fun of herself, even crack jokes at her own expense, in which she could joke about the fact that, oh, I drank so much, you won't believe it, darling. You cannot trust me. I am the worst narrator in the world. No, instead, she acted as if she was above all these people because she was more British than them, and even was so staunchly in her own echo chamber of belief that she couldn't even rationalize the fact that maybe she was in the wrong. Even though she was technically in the right to begin with, at no point in the story did Lo ever question her own authority. She always suspected that she was better of everyone else because she was more British than them, when in reality, she was the quintessential unreliable narrator. I really wish that Ruth Ware would have allowed her to be more of a flawed character in a more likable sense, in which, while she's drunk all the time, she doesn't sleep, she doesn't really hold herself up to the same morals as everyone else around her, but at least she's funny. You know, make her likable in any sense of the word. Even if she was allowed to like her boyfriend at one point, or she found anything positive about him. But it just seemed to me that Lo was just a heartless user who just went around exploiting everyone for her own personal gain. Judah was basically there as a warm body to keep her safe and sound in the nighttime whenever she needed him. At no point did she ever actually show that she cared about Judah outside of how he could service her and her needs. Same thing with her neighbor. She barely grants her any semblance of humanity outside of the fact that she was nice enough to Lo to welcome her into her apartment. The only humanity she gives her neighbor is the fact that she's this gentle, old, sad woman who is so lonely that the only reason why she gives Lo any time of day is because she knows that she needs her. Lo literally runs to the nearest neighbor before she runs to her own boyfriend. And going back to what I said about the color symbolism of this book, I do also want to call to question the fact that Lo is also associated with the water counterpart, the frozen water itself, ice. The fact that she is literally stumbling through snow in this barren wasteland that is in part her own soul and experience, in which she is ending the story where she is running for her life through this icy terrain to also symbolize the fact that she has been icy cold and distant from her own life in the very beginning. The fact that this is almost karmic retribution for her, where she is in a barren wasteland of her own making. The fact that she is literally navigating through this icy wasteland of nothingness is also very much symbolic of the fact that Lo has nothing in her life that she can really fall back on. The same way that blue also symbolizes loneliness is the same way that winter also symbolizes the lack of growth or maturity. Nothing in winter ever grows. Everything in winter dies, and it's literally in this bit of slumber where it's waiting for spring to come where it can literally burst forth and grow once again. Where Lo is in this stagnant place in her life where nothing is really happening, nothing is really growing or maturing. She is basically the same state as ice, this cold, isolating part of herself where she just does not wish to move about the same way that Judah does, where he's associated with the color of red, which symbolizes love and passion, even compassionate nature, in which he welcomes Lo in because he knows that she has no other place to go. And I'm sad that Ruth Ware abandoned this part of her book where it allowed any kind of semblance of creativity or figurative language that added an extra layer to her story that would have really elevated this otherwise mediocre mystery into something much, much more. And the only other good thing I will say about this book is the fact that it did make me want to go to Sweden. I got a lot of wanderlust from The Woman in Cabin 10 as a whole, and I will say that this book really motivated me to want to explore Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland way more because at least then I would know how to say thank you in Swedish, which is duck. And I would like to apologize to any of my Swedish viewers who just listen to me butcher their language. I wholeheartedly apologize, but at least I can say I'm not as bad as Lo, who would fault you for not being English enough. So you're welcome, I guess. The bar for white women is really in hell at this point, I will say. All right, everyone. And now that we have discussed the things that I genuinely enjoyed about this book, let's move on to the things I really abhorred with a fiery, burning passion of 1,000 suns. And that is really the fact that this book just felt like a very contrived, very derivative form of every other kind of mystery novel that came before it. Not only that, but also mystery shows and movies like Knives Out, White Lotus, any Agatha Christie book like The Death on the Nile specifically, really called to question whether or not this book was actually creative at all and whether or not Ruth Ware was just doing a whole copy and paste feature when it came to this story. And I will say the one thing that was absent from those stories and from this one was the fact that it had absolutely nothing to say. White Lotus is an entire satire about how rich people get away with murder, literally. Agatha Christie's books are all about justice, and even the Knives Out franchise is all about sticking it to the man. But this book had absolutely no direction. This book had no other message other than to just be the worst version of yourself and to hope that the universe gives you a get out of jail free card. Lo did not change as a character. She did not need to grow or change over time because the world adapted and folded to her. She was able to get out of the situation because luckily people just felt bad for her. They took pity on her and took her under their wing, like her friendly neighbor, like the woman in cabin 10, and even the farmers in the icy terrain of Sweden. Because of these people, Lo was able to thrive. She had no real autonomy this entire story. She relied on other people to do her dirty work for her. Case in point, the poor captain on the ship that she was on. Case in point, her boyfriend, who was in many email thrilling excerpts in this book, was vigorously typing to try to find out where she was. And even the strange farmer people that she stumbled into, those people had enough heart and compassion to really try to help her get out of this very tricky situation. Lo was never able to really tap into her own skill set because everyone else literally bent to her own will. Everyone in the story was basically serving to help Lo get out of a bad situation, or just exercise themselves as a villain in her story so she could act as a martyr. And really that just made me lose respect for her as a protagonist because at no point during this story did Lo actually contribute to it. She was the victim the entire time, and that never really changed.
I've been victim all your life.
And really, she served no other purpose other than to win the Most Incompetent FNC Award of 2025. Better luck next year, Violet Sorrengail. The other thing I hate about this book, like I mentioned before, is the fact that the boat continued to grow and expand in itself, and the author really had no idea of the geography of this boat, because I swear to God, every time we got to a new chapter, a new room was added, a new level was added. All of these floors and extra amenities of this boat were just added on as we went forward. And it seemed like this boat was just this amalgamation of random rooms that were just squished together. Not unlike the topography of any dystopian novel, which is like Ready Player One, where all these houses were stacked on top of each other. And I got really confused and I could not tell which way was up, and I just feel like the author had no idea what normal yachts look like. Not that I'm a yacht expert, but it seems like this author was just randomly adding things on because they just needed it for plot convenience, and there was really nothing else to it. Also, I really hated the fact that this book was interspersed with random excerpts of Judah just trying to email people and desperately find his ex-girlfriend and figure out where she was. Because again, at this point, Lo had broken up with him because she did not want to be as serious as he did. So she broke up with him, and this man is trying so hard to find her, which then again, it's a very nice thing for him to want to do. But if a person that I gave up my career for broke up with me, I don't think I would try this hard to find them in the middle of the ocean. Maybe that's just because I'm a jaded bitch. I'm not as good of a person as Judah is. But it just seemed very strange that he was trying so hard to find a person that broke up with him recently and someone who was not even his official girlfriend. Like, hun, go to New York. Leave her alone. She does not like you. She's only using you because she needs a warm body to sleep next to the next time she gets robbed. Just saying. And speaking of Judah, I really don't like this character at all because at one point it felt like he was trying to rob her of her autonomy in their own relationship, where he was forcing her into a very serious situation that she did not want to be a part of. It was very clear that she wanted to just casually date him. That's totally fine. But it's very clear that she set a very strict boundary with him that he was not respecting, and he was just trying to over and over again push her goalposts, force her to do the very thing that she did not want to do for his own pleasure and at her own expense. And I do not appreciate that in men when they constantly force women who are clearly not into them to try to get into a relationship that mostly benefits them. And I do not like Judah as a character because he just seemed like a very poor, pathetic excuse for a character, because he was trying so hard to be with this woman who obviously was not into him. Like, give it up, babe. Just go to New York, find a woman who's very interested in your very bland, saltine cracker ass, and just release Lo from your life. Honestly, this man had absolutely no reason to be with Lo other than the fact that she was just conveniently there and he was just too lazy to go find someone else. That's just my personal belief when it comes to characters like Judah. Judah just gave me the ick throughout this entire book, and I don't like men like him who rob women of sleep just so they can have an excuse to stay around with them longer, who push women's boundaries, who constantly almost stalk women by emailing their friends and family to figure out where they are because this woman is ghosting them. Like, seriously, extract this storyline and put it into a different book in which Lo is not conveniently in a very bad situation and Judah is just trying to find out where his ex-girlfriend is. This would be in a very different narrative, which Judah would look like the stocky, creepy ex-boyfriend, very similar to Joel Goldberg from the You series, and not this concerned boyfriend who's trying to find out where his girlfriend is. Just saying. Another thing I didn't really enjoy about this book was the fact that the billionaire, the main antagonist of this book, thought that he'd get away in this day and age with infidelity. If Coldplay has taught us anything, it's that in the age of social media, you really are always out there in the open. You cannot hide or escape from your past or from yourself, and you cannot expect to get away with murder, let alone a cheating scandal. And I just thought it was so strange that a billionaire who is one of the most famous, prolific people in the world expected people to not figure out that he's cheating on his wife, let alone his own wife. And it was very strange to me that this man thought that his wife wouldn't figure out that he was cheating, let alone the entire world, and I thought that was incredibly funny. Also, I will have to say that I found no one outside of the crew of this boat to be a character that I could root for. Everyone on this boat really sucked. Everyone was deceitful. Everyone was hiding something. No one on this boat was a three-dimensional character. Everyone was this two-dimensional caricature of the rich, entitled man and woman, and it was just hard to root for anyone, truth be told. There were no real redeeming qualities of this book at all, and even worse, the main character, Lo herself, was the worst part of this entire story. Allow me to introduce you to some amazing quotes that just really highlight why Lo is the worst part of the story in general. So this is when Lo is going around and basically accusing the non-British crew of murdering this poor woman. So Nilsson is a poor person that Lo decides to just terrorize throughout this entire book because he's the captain and she wants this woman's death to be brought to justice. And she just basically uses that entire excuse to just hound him in the very Karen way that she usually does in order to get her way. And she is being introduced to these people who will be working for her for the rest of the boat trip. And this is when she is being introduced to one woman in particular named Eva. And Nilsson tells Eva that she saw this woman on the boat and she thinks that she died. And she thinks that Eva could be the woman. Eva says, "I'm afraid it wasn't me," Eva said, but quite kindly. There is no trace of the slight tribal defensiveness the girls downstairs had betrayed. Lo, what do you mean by tribal defensiveness? Can you explain that to me, please? I'm just curious. What do you mean by tribal defensiveness? So Eva says, "Good morning, Miss Blacklock," she said, smiling. I shook her hand. Her grip firm, her fingers bony but strong. Her English was astonishingly good. Almost as good as the girl in the cabins had been, but it wasn't her. Why is it so important to you that this woman's English is so good? So that was on page 115. And in page 95, this is when we are first introduced to Nilsson, the captain of the boat. And she says, his English was very, very good. Just a faint trace of Scandinavian accent. Again, I question, why is this necessary? Why do we need to know any of this? Why? So yeah, that's what I really thought of this book. And I have to say that I was incredibly disappointed. Like I said before, I really had high hopes for this book in the very beginning. I thought it had a really good sense of humor. I thought there was a lot of good color symbolism, but it just turned out to be another mediocre book with a lot of white supremacist undertones that I was not expecting. And that really just threw off the entire tone of the story for me. And I haven't even watched the movie yet, and already just looking at the heinous reviews that it has gotten, I'm not particularly convinced that they made the story any better. So we'll see how that goes. But overall, I rated this book a 1 out of 5 stars for reasons that I believe are quite obvious. I just could not find the story to be believable. I found the heroine insufferable at best and problematic at worst. No one in the book was redeemable at all, and I just could not wait for the story to end. And it just made me really realize how low this book was overall. It just was not a very good mystery. And I say that as someone who has read quite a few good mystery books. It just really fell right below the bar, and I feel like it does not take a lot to make a good mediocre mystery book, and this author really failed on all accounts. So anyway, if you are looking for a very good mystery book, I would definitely push you in the direction of Agatha Christie, or even in the direction of Ruth Ware's other book, In a Dark, Dark Wood. That would be much more interesting. Otherwise, just try to stick to the classics. So anyway, that's about it for today. That's all I can say about this utter train wreck of a mystery. It's just a huge letdown, and I just would not recommend it to anyone at all. And let me know what you all thought about this. Did you watch the movie? What did you think about it? What do you think makes a very good mystery book? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like down below if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one. And of course, don't forget to keep reading. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.